Well, welcome back, guys. So, step 4 of the trailer build. Just having a slurp of tea. Right, so we finished off in the last one where we got all the photo etch done, all the hydraulic lines done. Really starting to bring this together. And now we're moving on to, we've got the air connectors and electrics here on the front of the swan neck grab handle, and then we've got these platform handrails and tools, I'm assuming, tire levers or whatnot. We've then got the spare wheels for the trailer unit. We've got the derrick for winching them on and off, the actual winch handle, pulley and a hook, and then finally we've got the second set of wheel chocks opposite to the side we put on in the last part. So I've taken the time obviously to cut these off the sprue, and I've cleaned them up ready for assembly, so I thought it would be a bit quicker to keep the build moving. So we'll start with the easy ones first. Back on with the Tamiya extra thin, and just the same as before, a couple of touches of extra thin, and then just come in with a part. I do tend to use tweezers quite a lot. It is purely down to the fact that I've got huge muckle hands. Muckle being the old Norn word for big, Norn being the old dialect in the Shetland Islands where I come from. Large hands. There we go. And whilst we're at that, we can just pop in these because they're going to go in there. They just sit in like that. Helps if you get them in the right way, obviously. So they'll sit in and they'll naturally probably slip down. Vibration of the vehicle moving along and that, so they'll be towards the bottom end of the carrying bracket. So just put them in, let them settle, and then touch and flow with the glue, and that just gets them done. A gentle push will seat them and help bond that plastic, and then you can actually do a little run along the rail where they're holding the chocks. We may as well get these small bits out of the way whilst we're here. So we've got the handle going on. And it is really nice to see these parts going on because it means you're actually getting somewhere with the build. That's these parts that seem to take ages as well. Especially if you keep dropping them like I do, whole butterfingers. Third time lucky. And you'll see on some of these parts, like this one for example, then I haven't fully cleaned up the attachment point. It's just on the top of the loop here. And the reason for that is I wait for it to cure up in its final position once it's glued. And it's just a bit more stable and strong to come in with a fine sanding stick or a scalpel to do a bit of scrape cleaning and then buffing with sanding stick, and it's easier. You're not having to worry about holding the part. It's being held by it being in place. Right, we'll go for the middle one first, is the electrical connector, I think. Now there is a name for these connectors, and my son, who is a apprentice HGV mechanic, did tell me what they were, and for the life of me I can't remember. Suffice to say, it's where the pneumatic air connectors go for the air braking system. So just make sure we've got them orientated properly. We're not pinged it across the room. Happy days, I certainly have. We'll find that one in a minute. So they just fit in nicely there. Again, I could do with doing a little bit of scrape cleaning on these just to get rid of some seam lines, but I'll do that once they've actually cured up in the plastic. Once the glue's cured. Just give me a moment while I find the bit I've just thrown across the room. Back, and luckily for me it didn't take the 2 evenings it did to find the last piece I lost. It landed in my lap, so the parts gods were shining down on me, saying, "Thou shalt not waste your life looking for a part on the floor." Right, so that's that in place. So ultimately we will have the blue and red coiled hoses connect into these for the braking system, and then we'll have electrical connector there for the lighting system. So next up we've got these handrails, and if they're anything like the rest of the kit they should just fit quite nicely, which they do not. Thankfully they're a lot bigger, so they're easier to hold, so we can actually get a drop of glue on them. It is kind of common sense, I suppose, when you're designing these trucks. And I know if you certainly in the United Kingdom, if you look at the fuel delivery trucks, then they've all got handrails on them now. The higher trucks, they're collapsible handrails, but they all have to be deployed when personnel are accessing the elevated areas of the vehicles, and it's common sense. You want to protect your employees and your service personnel, because they're very expensive to train up, and everybody wants to come home from a day's work. So having handrails when you're up on these high parts is just absolute common sense. Stop you falling. Right. Next part are these. Now they look like a tool of some sort, but this is where a lot of modern instructions fall down, is they never tell you what these parts are. And I don't know about you, but I certainly would like to find out what all these parts are, just to learn, you know, build that information set up of what you're modeling, to understand it a bit more. I suppose if I was thinking, I probably would have had this part affixed to the handrails before I put them in, but that would just be too much like being clever for me. So we'll do it after and give ourselves a challenge. This is why I do this, so you guys can learn from my errors and make your build that little bit easier. There we go. Oh goodness, I really am doing well today, aren't I? How about I just take it off and do it properly? There we go. Right, back on. Just a very thin layer of glue just to reactivate what's already there and aid good adhesion. Gentle push. That is that part there, and then it will probably just fix that rail there, so we'll just give it a helping hand, a little glue on the back of it, and touch it in. And we can just put a drop of glue there, and then that'll just give it an extra bit of bond, really make that a strong part. Alright, let's see if we can get the other side done without having to take it off. That would be handy, wouldn't it? Something tells me that my boy called these Susie connectors, but I might be wrong. He doesn't want to fit on there. There we go. Perfect. We'll just lock that in on the other side like we did on the first one. Not actually sure if it needs to do that. What does the instructions say? We don't really get a plan view. It does kind of look like it's touching there, so oh well, so be it. It's certainly a firm fixture. Right, enough of that nonsense. Let's turn this around, reorientate this part. So we've got this, we'll do this and we'll do the wheels last. So this is the spare wheel derrick. So Q1, there's two Q1s, one either side, and then we've got this pulley in the middle. So the first thing we can do is we can just put a drop of glue there and we'll get the pulley on one side. Like so, and then we can lay that down on that part there. Now it's not saying don't cement, so I don't think it's going to be a problem to cement this together. If you were wanting to make a diorama where this was being used, then you might want to kind of do the setup first so you can get the angles and the twist right. There's obviously this, as you see there, this part here is designed to swivel on that boom, but we're having this in the stowed position, so it doesn't just matter too much. So we'll just put a little bit of glue in there because we want both half of this to be properly fixed together, and we'll call that good. Right, the next one is the actual winch mechanism. So reorientate the part so that it mirrors the instructions, and then we've got I've already pre-folded this piece of photo etch, so it's SA7, and again we'll look at that. I'll get the right way around. So this big hole here is where the winch handle goes, and this smaller hole here is where the axle for the pulley goes, and it just, if you bend it right, it should just click in and hold itself there. We can always put a drop of super glue on. I'm going to leave mine loose because I'm going to try and, we have got winch cable to put around here, so I'm going to leave it loose so we can just roll the cable around the drum and get it look like it's got a decent amount of cable on it. The handle next, so you've got a piece here with little ridges on it, that's the actual hand part of the handle, and then the thicker shaft is the part that goes in the winch mechanism, and that just slides through like so. And this will be the point where we need to get a little bit of super glue, just secure this plastic in place. So I'll get my trusty X28 Tamiya paint pot. I'll drop a glue on the bottom of it, and my applicator, which I stowed away. So that's my Display super glue applicator that I've been using for years and years and years. Probably had this for 2 or 3 years now, and it's helped build many a model where I've done photo etch work. Very good, handy tool. You don't get the handle for it. That came from something else. You just get this photo etched applicator. You can use it just with your hand if you want, because it has a big enough handle on the back. And obviously you've seen me clean it with just an ordinary bog standard lighter. You just burn away the little bit of residue, dried super glue. Right, next thing to do is to get this winch on the davit itself. So just cover this surface here with it doesn't need to be too much, just a thin layer of glue, and then obviously making sure that the handle is orientated in the correct direction. So it goes to the front of the davit, and then you just make sure it's in the middle of the winch assembly as best you can, and obviously square in the center of there we go. Right, and once it's in a place you're reasonably happy with, then just come back in and just wick a bit more in there to get that really good strong bond, which is what we need. So this will be one of the things, if you knock it you're going to lose it. So let's get plenty of glue on it so we don't lose it. Right, that's fine. So now we've got the unenviable task of threading through a piece of line. Just clean that off. So we've got to thread through a piece of line. It's 120 mils they're calling for. I'll have a look and see what's in our little tub that we set aside at the beginning of this build. If I remember rightly, there was two types of line. I fear this thinner black one will be the one that they are looking for. There. And it is just a thread. That probably is nearly, what's that, 30 centimeters? What are they saying, 120? So we need half of this. Yeah. Well, we'll take a little extra. Best to have plenty is not enough. So if we take an extra 10 centimeters. Alright. So first things first, we've got to thread it through just do that, and that will wick away burn away the fluff. I don't want to lose this hook. That's my thought. I thought this was going to happen. It's going to be a bit too thick to get through here. Right. I am not going to mess around with this. If it's not going to work, we're going to get some of our own stuff that we know works well. So out of my trusty box of elastics and threads, I've got some green cotton thread that doesn't have as much fluff on it, and it's reasonably in scale with the stuff they were looking for using, so I think we'll be okay with this. So we can take plenty because we've got plenty. Oh, this is polyester. I do stand corrected. It's stuff I nicked out of my mum's sewing box years ago. However, it works well. see if we can get it threaded a little easier now than the other stuff we were wanting to use. So that just goes through. I'm sure it will. Well, I never. Maybe not then. Yeah, there we go. Now we could just do a simple knot. I am not a great knot tie-up, but we'll get something on anyway. So half a dozen times around, holding the main line reasonably taut. This is where you need 6 pairs of hands. And then pass it back through. So it's like nearly a fisherman's type knot. It should hopefully be a reasonably slim knot. So just pass that back through, and then keeping the main line taut, just pull down on that. Just readjust so you can get it all working in the way you need it to. Pull down, and then we'll put a drop of super glue on there, and then we'll trim off the end, and that'll be a reasonably snug looking knot, not a lumpy bulbous thing. We want to still keep it being in character with what it's supposed to be. So we drop a super glue on the knot itself. The thread will absorb it nicely and harden up reasonably quickly. It turns the thread dark once it soaks into it. It's just basically acting like a resin to seal it. That's it. So that's the hook on place. We can come back in with a nice sharp scalpel blade and just trim off the excess. And that is a very, very neat, which is what we want. Now the next thing to do is to pass the line through here. It should go. It's quite a tight hole in there as well. So just grip it with the tweezers and work it through. It will go. There we go. There we go. Now, what we want to do is we want to wind that cable drum. That hook will hook around here. So we want to wind the cable drum so we actually get a few layers of thread on it. And that's purely to make it look realistic. It's a drum full of winch cable. So in doing that, what we need to do is just take a little bit of super glue and dot it in the middle there, and then we want to get the end of the line and just hold it over there, making sure that it's curving with the shape of the winch barrel. And that's purely because you don't want to have a flat spot. And then when we're satisfied it's glued, what we'll do is just get a little drop of activator just to make it go off that little bit quicker. Doesn't need much. We'll trim the end. This is really where you do need a very sharp scalpel blade, because you want it to cut straight away without fraying. Once the end is trimmed and away, and then we can start and wind, and it's just a case of keeping a little bit of tension so it's a nice tight wind, but just wind. You might need your tweezers to help. There we go. And you need to hold it so it doesn't spring back as well. And if we can hook the hook in place, we can wind it to the point that everything's tight. So just keep winding little bit by little bit. And if you think it's going to wind too much on, we'll just have to cut it and start again. Hopefully we're not far off. Keep that tension on so it winds nice and tight. And it takes a little bit of time, but in doing it, it's one of these things that's worth doing, because it just gives you that little bit more realism. And that's how you can see it coming tight. Now I've probably put a little too much thread on this part. There we go. It's even holding itself in place. So just make sure that all the thread is on the pulley. Sometimes it just doesn't want to work at all. There we go. That is good enough. So we've got a little bit of thread on there. It's reasonably tight, and what we do now is we glue it before it turns into a bird's nest, which we're very close to being one. So touch of glue on the end of the shaft. My super glue is going off rather quickly, and then we can just put a touch of glue on the thread itself, and that will hold its position. Actually, it looks reasonably good as well, to be fair. It's a nice detail. And I do distinctly remember that this this detail was lacking on the old 911 kit that I built, in that they didn't have a hook or line. It was just the derrick without any of the rest of it. So that then goes onto here. It'll only go one way, and it fits quite nicely. What we can do to make, just to aid our fitment a bit, is we can pop a little drop of super glue on there, which should give us a bit of quick adhesion. That will do if it grips. So just come in there and just paint some super glue there in the centre, and then wick in some extra thin after. So part goes in there like that, and just press and hold so it's in firm. It's taking a moment to go off. Obviously make sure it's straight, parallel with the rail it's sitting on. Maybe a bit of accelerator, maybe. When your super glue gets old, it takes time to dry. It's simple. It just is what it is. That's why you see a lot of modders will just buy the little $1 tubes, and then it doesn't get wasted. I usually just buy it when it's on offer. Right, that's gripped now, that's good. Just blow off the air to evaporate the excess, and then we'll just come in with some extra thin and just run that in all the other joints to make sure that's fully bonded. Right, so the last thing to do now is the wheels. So conscious time is ticking on. How does this go together? So we've got the outer and inner. There's the outer, there's the inner. Doesn't really matter which way they go. Drop it extra thin and push together. It will run around the whole rim, but I always tend to do it in 2 spots, and then you know you've covered it. Okay, and then we've got the center, and that locks in to those lugs there, like so. Extra thin, plenty in there, good joint. And then what we want to do is make sure that that center is centered. Excusing the repeating myself, but yeah, you want to make sure that it does. It's a bit of a loose fit, so you just have to get it as good as you can. Realistically, when you look at it that way around, you're not actually going to see if it's totally off center, but the better you get it, the more realistic it's going to be. So with M1070, we'll just make sure we orientate it to the way it was in the instructions, and then it would be, I'm assuming that it'll just, yeah, there we go. We don't actually need glue on that. It just presses home, and friction fit, which is the way I'm going to leave it, because then we can take it off to paint, which will be very, very handy. So second wheel. The other thing to remember, if you can, with wheels, is orientate them that where you've cut them off the sprue, they're opposite each other on the rim. That makes it so much easier for cleanup, because you just have to clean that area rather than doing more than 2 points. Right, so same again, that's gone all the way around, so we don't need to do a second point. Get the center, drop it in, plenty of glue. And then make sure it's centered, and then press it home so it bonds in that spot. When you're happy, line it up, and that's it. And that's a really nice firm fit. So we can then orientate this part. And again, it doesn't tell you how it goes. So I'm assuming we'll just have to try it and see which is the most favorable way for it to go, whether it goes with the straight piece forward or whether we go at the sloped piece forward. I don't know. It might be worth checking some references to make sure. That's the straight piece forward. It's not too bad. If we do it the other way around, is it not going to fit the other way around? Nope, it'll only go one way. Well, that makes life easier then, doesn't it? So it's the straight edge to the front. That fits perfectly. Good. Well, that's one less thing to worry about. At least we know how that goes together. So just pop it in and make sure it's vertically aligned. Bearing in mind that we have to get the wheels on and off here. I think we're pretty good at that. Right, that is section 4 done. What have we got next? Good, section 5, we're going to start on the trailer itself. How many of these do we have to build? 2 lots? Yeah, 1 lot. 1 lot. This must be the center section of the trailer. Okay. Right, well, what I'll do is we'll just stop the camera now, and I'll do what I do always, and we'll get all these parts laid out, cleaned up, and then we'll come back and we'll start with assembly. So we'll see you again shortly.